And it's kind of like a real estate agent, you know, about 90% of them aren't very good, but the 10% that are good are really, really good. It's the same thing with brokers. And so if you're looking to sell your company, you do really want to vet it. Vet the brokers. If you're looking to buy a company, you want to vet that broker on the other side. I actually worked with the broker probably maybe a year ago or so. And I just sent it out to a few friends that I knew had been looking for deals or had done deals in the past. And it turns out one of my friends actually had bought a company through this broker, and a lot of things were inaccurate within that and were kind of beefed up and that sort of thing. So yeah, there are a lot of good brokers, but they're kind of hard to find, but there are out there. When it comes to selling your company, you can kind of go two paths, right? I think it's really common if you've got like a local business where you have a general manager or somebody that just makes a natural fit, or if you are kind of looking to open it up a little bit, you're probably going to need to go down the broker route. I have found out that, you know, some broker fees are negotiable depending upon the size of the company. You know, if you're selling a several $1 million company, sometimes you can negotiate some of the fees, but you can find the fees anywhere from about 8% to 15% of the total purchase price. So a pretty large amount. And so you want to make sure you vet that broker, and whether you're buying or selling, that they're actually going to add the value that you're looking for.
Thanks.
Looks like Krista had a question as well. Ryan, are you able to see that chat now?
Yep, I just pulled it up. Who do you recommend to give you a valuation of an e-commerce business? What experiences have you had in working with an evaluator? So there are services that do that. A common one, I can, you know, maybe Taylor, I can send, rather than kind of type and chat at the same time, I'll send a list of all these kind of sites that I use, evaluation ones. There's a company called Centurica that does it. You can look at a lot of brokerage sites such as feinternational.com or quietlightbrokerage.com. And they'll start to give you some ideas of where your size e-commerce company would fall in line. But a lot of times you can actually chat with any brokers, and they'll give you a quick rundown of businesses that they've sold that are similar to your business, or, you know, specific valuations and rough valuations on that. One thing too with brokers is I find this to be really, really common. And sometimes they'll say, hey, your business is worth like 10X, you know, because you kind of hear stories about, you know, such and such SaaS companies selling for 10X. Typically it's not. When you're thinking of say $4 million, $5 million, you're typically going to be at about a 2.5 to 4.5X your profit, or your seller discretionary earnings, or EBITDA, or whatever you want to call it. Usually on average, it's about 3X. So when you're just kind of doing some rough estimates in your, you know, on your phone, on your calculator, in your brain, it's about 3X, but most business brokers can give you an idea of what that would range. Now, of course, there are defensibilities, right? So if you have a lot of things such as you're fast growing, or you've got like a patent or you know, trademarks to kind of have some different moats, of course, that's going to increase your multiple, and all those little things that take a long time to finish, you know, that's going to add more value to your company.
So that's one thing that I would be interested in, Ryan, from your perspective. I have a friend who used to be at a large CPA firm, and doing, basically he would get engaged by VCs to go in and pound the valuation down of the investment. He left that and was doing the opposite. So he was going into businesses and helping them get prepared to increase their valuation. And I think we've got maybe one or a few people on the call that probably have seen that. Bill Park, I don't know if you've experienced that from either or both sides, but I just wonder, Ryan, what you would say going into a company. What are the top elements of either pounding down or building up the valuation? So both from the buy side and the sell side, how would you go about that?
Yeah, so I think so maybe let's start with like the pounding up, right? So to increase the value of your business, kind of those 4 points we talked about. Anytime you have a defensible moat, if you have a patent or trademarks, if you have multiple streams of revenue, or multiple contracts, if you have multiple suppliers that you work with, a lot of things that we see drive it down is if you have one supplier and it's all relying on them. Or, you know, I looked at a company, I think it was like in Missouri or something. They were a tow truck company, and like 80% of their business was through AAA, which is great. And they'd had it for 10 years. But if you lost that AAA business, you wouldn't have a business anymore. You wouldn't be able to compete. So those are kind of the things that like normal business stuff that when you do your SWOT analysis, that's what you want to look for. The things that kind of drive it down, anytime you have poor financials or if it's decreasing at all, like if your business is going down, that's going to be the quickest way to probably kill your valuation. You might go from a 4X to a 2.5X. So you're shaving off 1.5X off your total price in terms of your EBITDA. So I would say, and you really don't want to, you don't want to go down. That's probably the biggest thing.
Bill Park, do you have any
any
thoughts on that from your perspective?
Yeah, just a couple. I mean, I guess on the downside, I saw a deal happen earlier this year where you get to an EBITDA adjustment phase and the buyer was all in, and later through their diligence started to have real issues with the EBITDA adjustments. And there's no better way to kill a deal than to have the buyer feel like you're making false representations on your adjustments, right? So, and Ryan spoke really well to this earlier about like, hey, you can't run your trip to Hawaii as an add back or whatever as you think about it. So, just be aware that if you're making any adjustments to the bottom line to help them get comfortable with the loan, there's going to be pushback and you don't want to misrepresent it. Even if you feel like it's safe, like always just be upfront about that kind of thing. And the thing I'd ask Ryan, the best, way to increase value I've seen is to get a market going where you get multiple bidders. So I'd just be interested to hear if you have any experience with that, Ryan.
Yeah, I try to avoid if I'm bidding against someone else. But absolutely, if you've got multiple bidders, it's kind of like you got a car sitting in your front yard and you got two buyers there, right? It's just going to bid the price up. A lot of brokers will try to start that and kind of create those bidding wars, but that's going to be the best way. If you've only got one buyer on the table, you've only got one company to sell. You both have a little bit of power, right? The buyer wants your company, but you want the buyer to pay you. But if you've got someone else kind of in the back of the, kind of hanging around waiting for something to fall through, that business sale is probably not going to fall through because there's someone else who's kind of swoop in. But absolutely, having multiple buyers is probably one of the biggest things and one of the hardest things to do, if not done correctly and kind of been really targeted early on of, hey, who are the potential buyers? Let's go find a strategic buyer.
That's good. So Shane Willard just posted up a question, and I have the same question, so it's awesome. What can you run us through what you looked for in the company that you just bought or you're buying right now as the opportunities that were most appealing for you to be able to leverage what your the value of the company?
Yeah. Let me start with mine and then I can give some examples because mine's an online company and then I'll give some examples of like what I would look for on a local business. So the company we looked at, it had been around for almost 10 years. It had took not a Series A, it took a seed round of funding. And to me, that was important. They took a seed round of funding and it didn't, 10X, it didn't have that explosive growth. So it couldn't have that VC round. So the two founders, two very, very sharp guys, way smarter than me, ran the business for a few years and then they never got to that scalability, but they had raised too much money to kind of continue to operate it. So they took the next 4 years, the last 4 years of the business, they didn't spend any time in the business. They basically put in about an hour in a month. And I'm actually not making that up. It's like unbelievable how little they did in the business. And it goes to show that they built a great foundation, but the business itself was structured wrong. You can't have a bunch of investors for a business that doesn't get massive. And so they took that last 4 years and basically paid off all their investors. And they were able to get to a point where if they had an exit, they would both make money and, be satisfied. So that was one area too, where the deal structure was actually just bad for them, but it's a great structure for two guys with no investors out of Salt Lake City. And, this is a great business that we think should be a lot bigger. So one of the things that it looks for is they weren't working in the business at all. If someone's working 50, 60 hours a week already in the business, I don't have much more time than that, or the business has to be large enough that I can then go hire someone to do that so I can focus on the operational side or just growing the business or something else. The main thing that we looked at that's kind of one thing too, is how much time is being put in. That's really common with online businesses. One thing that I look for across all businesses is, do they have underutilized assets? And what I mean by that is, like, the most common one I see in online businesses is they aren't using email correctly. 20 to 30% of an e-commerce company, 20 to 30% of the revenue from an e-commerce company should be coming from their email list. So say, for example, they have 20,000 emails and they're not getting revenue from that. To me, that's a very quick win that I know I have the right people. I have a background in sending emails out, and I would have the right people who I know have sent out millions of emails in their career that I could hire to set up email flows for me, that I think I could see an instant 20 to 30% bump on their overall revenue. So those are kind of the underlying assets, right? So they might have like a great brand, but they haven't launched a product in 4 years. That's a really common one that I see with online companies. And so anytime you have these underlying assets that aren't being utilized, or just the owner got lazy, that's what I'm looking for. And we were able to find a business that had, 230,000 emails, and they weren't doing anything with them. These are good active emails and they do nothing with them. So me and my partner thought, hey, if we do this right, we feel like we can add way more value to their customers, but also, grow significantly the business. When it comes to an offline business, a really common thing is, someone's been running the business for 20 years. They've got it on autopilot, and they don't have updated Google My Business pages, right? They don't have Google reviews, or they haven't done any local marketing. They haven't done any Facebook targeted marketing in that county or in that city. Those are kind of the most common things that I see. I've also seen businesses where you've got founders who aren't watching costs. Costs creep up, right? If you've been running something for 10 years, you forget what it was like when it was really lean 10 years ago, and there's instant cost savings that you can typically have. So overall, I look for anything that has underlying assets or underutilized assets that are already baked into the business but aren't being used correctly.
Ryan, when you say you're looking for underlying costs that maybe are bloated, how do you do that evaluation? Are you using like multiples, like, oh, dentist office should spend 7% of their revenue on supplies, but this one's spending 13? Or how are you doing that type of analysis?
Yeah, so this is where it comes into when you're thinking about industries to kind of get into. I stick to things that I know, right? I stick to e-commerce. If someone knows the dental industry really well, they can kind of nail those down. And so I know just my background in e-commerce, I know general numbers, what they should be looking at. I know which softwares they should be using, but haven't used yet. And so I know there could be cost savings there. So I think a lot of it is understanding the industry already you get in. It's hard to, like, if I go in blindly to like a construction company, I have no idea what the price of lumber is, and I'm instantly behind the 8 ball, and I'm probably not going to do very well. And so I think sticking to what you know, or at least bringing on someone who knows that industry as a partner, is really, really critical. I know someone a few years back in a nearby state bought a bunch of dry cleaners. Structured a great deal, and they didn't know anything about dry cleaners. So they went and hired the general manager who had been running the dry cleaners and made them a partner of the new entity. So he could come in from the business and financing aspect, but they already had the general manager who was already running these things, gave him a huge upside. And that way he knows already these numbers within the business of where they could cut costs.
That's awesome. We're getting close to 11:50. Typically, we will wrap up about now. If there are other questions, jump in. It looks like maybe Krista sent one. Are there presentation methods or key points you use to help buyers understand business potential, and is potential a valuable selling aspect?
Yeah, potential usually isn't. And the reason is like, you don't really pay for potential. Think of like an 18-year-old basketball player, right? He's got a ton of potential. He's 7 feet tall. He could be really good. But he hasn't quite made it to the NBA yet. It's kind of hard to bet on it. You don't know if he's going to make the right decisions and kind of get there. Same thing with the business. They're typically with like fast growing businesses. Say you're growing 2 or 3 times X every year. You're going to have, multiples that are kind of way out of the range that we're talking about, or, SaaS multiples of, publicly traded companies. But I think when it comes to potential, that's it's just really hard to sell the buyer on taking on all this risk for something that potentially might be there. A lot of times you're going to be looking back at the previous 12 months and say, hey, what was the EBITDA for the last 12 months? I can project it going forward. Maybe there's a 10% growth, and there might be a lot more potential in there. But if you feel like there's a lot more potential in your business, you should probably realize some of that potential and show them the upside of that growth before you want to exit. Too much potential, buyers won't pay for.
I'm kind of building on that too. I've done probably 40 M&As in the healthcare space. And one of the really common things, and a lot of what we used to do is turnarounds of distressed properties. And oftentimes I would get people coming up and saying, you want to buy this, there's a lot of potential here. If you just do this and this, I know you can, you're good at this. You're going to make this business like way better. I know you are. You should pay me for that. And I'm like, you wouldn't be selling if you had that. That's my upside, not yours. So ultimately you go back and forth and you'll probably give a little bit, but mostly the whole idea of selling your potential is sort of bad, because literally you're telling the prospective buyer that they should be paying you for their expertise when they haven't even been involved yet.
That's spot on. I can't see your name. It hasn't popped up, but spot on.
Garrett. Thanks, Garrett. Ryan, I really like that. I like the go out and get that potential yourself. That's smart to do. Like, if you can execute on it and there is that potential, it sounds like, and if I'm doing my math right, if you say there's potential for another $1 million of EBITDA, like if you go get that, you're going to now have a value that's 2.5 to 4.5 times that $1 million based on the multiples that you described. So it's very valuable for you to go execute on as much potential as you can, is what I'm hearing. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So if you think about your business and say every unit that you sell, someone's willing to pay you 3 times that unit profit, right? So you kind of want to do everything in your power to realize some of those, and you're going to leave some value on the table, but if you've got this massive upside, that's exactly right, Garrett. Like, that's my expertise that I'm bringing. That's my upside. That's why I want in on the deal. And if that upside was already there, you probably wouldn't sell. You just hold on to it.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks so much. This has been awesome. I've been seeing a lot of people that need to bounce. So I think we'll end now, but they have also been leaving the group with great things to say about your presentation. So really appreciate that. And look forward to following your success on your podcast, and would recommend everybody connect with Ryan on LinkedIn, just because he has so much great experience that he's sharing there. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate it.
Look forward to seeing everybody next week, and look for some emails and LinkedIn posts about upcoming speakers. I think next week, man, you'd think I'd be more prepared than this. Just hold on and I'll get you our lineup. So maybe not. I'm not that fast. Oh, we're close. We're close.
I think you have Andrew coming on in a couple of weeks. That's going to be a great one. Everyone's going to want to jump on that one.
Yeah, Andrew will. But next week, Austin Bankhead. So September 22nd, Austin Bankhead, one of our Midday members, is going to kind of go through how he sets up sales operations in companies. He's had some great background on SaaS companies, and like he helped build Qualtrics sales operation. He was a very early employee there, Snap Finance. He's had some great experience building sales operations. So that should be a good one as well. So
I second that. I used to work with Austin at Qualtrics, and he took what was a mess and made it very, very functional. It was amazing.
That's awesome. Great commercial. So appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody next week. Thanks so much.